Welcome to the Dementia Knowledge Network for today.
Thanks.
I'll start by doing the Acknowledgement of Country. So our meeting is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and I will throw to Sarah to introduce our guest speaker, Sue.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So Sue Petrini is a regional advocate with Elder Rights Advocacy. Elder Rights Advocacy is the Victorian service delivery organisation of the National Aged Care Advocacy Program. NACAP, is that how we say it, is funded by the Commonwealth and is a free service to older Australians who use or who are seeking out to use aged care funded programs. The advocate will provide information about the service, rights within the aged care system and how we support callers to the service. Sue's been working with ERA for 3 years and is located in regional Victoria. Thanks so much for coming along, Sue.
Oh, thanks for having me. I've been connected into your information that you get out and all the good work that you do as a dementia network through Joanna. So it's been really great for me to see what you guys do and how proactive you are to help people living with dementia and their families. It's fantastic. Really fantastic. So is it just the 4 of us or is there plenty more people and I can't see them because I'm on my phone?
So there's 8 of us in the room.
Lovely.
But we also put the video up on YouTube and we usually get about 20 people who watch it afterwards.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So I'm happy to launch into what I'm here for, and then if you are okay, I'm happy to also leave your meeting if that's what you would like me to do, so you continue with your normal business. I don't know whether you'd booked me for an hour. I don't know that I can speak for that long. I can.
That's all right. Just for as long as you like, and then we'll ask some questions.
Yeah, that's fine. I can certainly speak for a while, but might not be for that long. So I will start. So thank you, everybody, for letting me come to the meeting and getting the advocacy message out there. I guess as a dementia support network, everybody would be fairly across the aged care system. So let me know if that's not the case and I can provide you with some information about the process to through the system. But my understanding would be that the people you're working with, would have good knowledge of the aged care system in itself. So I work for Elder Rights Advocacy. I am an advocate sitting in regional Victoria. I am also now one of the team leaders within ERA, and that is partly because we are growing due to funding increases that have partly come from the Royal Commission and the approaches of our own Secretariat, OPAN, to government about the need for advocacy, especially for people, I suppose, recognised who have special needs, and that's special needs groups within the Aged Care Act. And part of that is, from my perspective, rural and regional people who are seeking to access aged care services. So Elder Rights Advocacy has been operating for 30 years in this space, primarily began with residential aged care, but of course with the I suppose explosion in community care through home care packages and Commonwealth home support, we now also work in that space, and other programs that are funded through the aged care stream. So that can include TCP, short-term restorative care, and I'm not going to remember the rest of them. I think there's about 5 or 6, but primarily we tend to have inquiries or advocacy around home care packages and residential aged care. Sometimes I've had clients with short-term restorative care and Commonwealth home support.
You can have it back.
Sorry, was that a question or someone's just chatting?
One person,
That's okay. That's okay. So Elder Rights Advocacy has been around in Victoria for 30 years. We are now part of the Older Persons Advocacy Network, which is all the SDOs across Australia who deliver the National Aged Care Advocacy Program. So our funding is now funneled through OPAN to us, tendered to us in Victoria to deliver the NACAP program. We also have Community Visitor Scheme funding. So that's not the Office of the Public Advocate scheme. That is purely a social support for people who are living with social isolation or identify as living with social isolation, either in residential care or in the community. At the minute, that program is funded, I suppose it's limited in that there are so many places offered through the funding and the government puts a cap on that. But Elder Rights Advocacy presently covers most of regional Victoria, and we refer to the metropolitan services who offer that service. We also are still part of the My Aged Care Navigator trial, which has recently been in Victoria, is managed, I suppose, by Council of the Aged Coda. We are now going forward offering navigator services through Barwon Southwest, Metro West, I'm going to say, and that might not be quite right, but in that area, and Metro North. So we now have a particular area in Victoria that we cover with Navigator. Of course, we're willing to support people to access services across Victoria and either refer or do that work ourselves as appropriate. But the advocacy service covers the whole of Victoria. We do a lot of telephone work. As I said, we're increasing our staff. At present, we have advocates placed in Melbourne Metro, in Geelong, I sit in Echuca in the north of the state. We have Gippsland advocates. We've just recruited to increase our staff by 5. So we'll have 2 sitting in the Hume region, which is Shepparton across to Wodonga, and down to Seymour. We'll have an extra one in Gippsland, and we've just recently recruited 2 more advocates for Melbourne, so Melbourne Metro, placed sort of a bit strategically, I suppose, to where our current advocates are. So we work within the National Aged Care Advocacy Program with OPAN, I suppose, as our secretariat. Elder Rights Advocacy is governed by a volunteer board of community members, and we are a free service to older Australians or their representatives. So there's no charge to anybody who calls our service. There's no charge for direct advocacy services, face-to-face visits if we can do them, which is a lot of older people's preference, and we often prefer that too. It's much easier to have a chat and resolve an issue face-to-face than trying to do it over multiple phone calls. But we are funded by the Commonwealth through OPAN and are free to older, in this case, older Victorians. The advocacy role is really about aged care services, so care and services within the aged care funded streams. As I said, residential home care packages, Commonwealth home support being the primary ones that we would probably have input into. Our advocacy works, as all advocacies would, I guess, in conjunction with the person and or their representative, and we do that with consent. So we don't take action without the consent of the person or their rep, but we often give information to callers on the telephone about what their rights are within aged care services, how they might approach a resolution if that's what they're seeking, and then go on to offer an advocate who can stand beside them and speak for them if that's what they want to happen. So we take many phone calls. We now have an intake team who are, I suppose, triaging those calls. I can't remember what our stats are in the last quarter, but last year during COVID, we were taking like 800 to 1,000 calls a month. Well, we weren't taking them, we couldn't physically do it. We had to send some to the OPAN call centre. But in effect, we have an intake team who now picks up the phone between 9 o'clock, and 4:30 on weekdays. And outside those hours, messages that are left or people who call will speak to someone on the Older Persons Advocacy Network telephone line, and they will be directed to the appropriate state service. So we will get our referrals back that way. So if someone misses us or can't reach us on the phone, as long as a message is left, we will return the call and see if we can work out what's going on for them. So often residential aged care, of course, in this environment in Victoria, a lot of it has been about restricted visiting, families being unable to pop in and see their loved ones. And it's been, I suppose, especially distressing for families whose person has dementia. And that, of course, in the aged care directions is a reason that families can visit. But we're still working in an environment where providers are running their own risk management, I suppose, and some providers take a harder line about that. And of course, if there's COVID present in a facility, then the public health unit is also directing what can happen. So lots of our calls last year, and it is happening again now because COVID seems to be spreading through Victoria and facilities at the minute, is about visitation. And so our role is to provide that family member with information about the rights of the older person to have access to people that they wish to see, and how we might be able to resolve that if they want some assistance in that. We understand with COVID, I suppose there is, I suppose from my perspective, we have to be mindful of the risks and of the fact that older people in residential care are living in a community setting. But aside from that, people living in residential aged care still have rights, human rights and aged care rights. And so our role is to try and work through that. And it sometimes is not the outcome that the person who's called is looking for, but we work towards the best outcome that we can support with. And of course, people then have an option to take it to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission if they're not satisfied with that outcome. That's a big driver of calls to us at the moment. The other is home care package provision. There is a shift at the moment. It's been happening probably for a little while about home care package provision and what people can access through that home care package. And we are working against, I suppose, that shift where it's not as easy to get people's needs met at home that we might consider is essential, that even a home care package provider might consider essential, but the answers coming back to them for advice about what they might do seem to be at odds with what we consider a need and what might help that person stay independent at home. One of the big ones is bathroom renovations for people. Home care providers are stating and also being, I suppose, advised that that's a capital improvement to a home and they can't do it. So our role is to try and work with them to work out what they can provide through the package, what sort of changes they might make to support that person to stay independent at home. Not all providers are saying no, some are. So for the ones who can't bring themselves to a decision about a person's care needs, where I think personal care is being able to shower and have access to that personal care is a major force in keeping people well and happy at home. We work to try and get what we can from that, either a full change in the bathroom or parts thereof. It is one of the big issues at the moment in home care packages. So sometimes I feel like I am beating my head up against a brick wall trying to get those services in place. But part of the advocacy role too is once people know their rights in aged care services and can understand that they do have rights, they are often able to advocate for themselves. And that's the gold standard, I suppose, self-advocacy. But often too, it is being heard. I find like people are very grateful is not a word I want to use, because no older person should be grateful for services that they receive. They're entitled to them, but they're very happy that there's someone who can talk to them about their issues and provide some options independently of any provider. And sometimes, as I said, the outcome is not what they first were seeking, but they are quite okay with the outcome that they can achieve and we can help them achieve. So really it's a lot done on telephone, as I said, but if possible, if needed, we'll go out, and if possible in today's world with COVID, we will go and visit with families. The navigator role probably does a lot of that, because that's trying to get people into the system to start with. And we often do family meetings or case review meetings with residential care or home care package providers. Of course, a lot more of it over Zoom these days, which I'm getting used to. I don't love it, but as I think it's the way of the world. And we need to reach more people as an agency ourselves. We need to reach more older people in Victoria. So if we can facilitate that through this sort of forum where people can jump online, then that's what we will do. I find this very useful for family meetings, I suppose, with residential services. It's good because a lot of families in the community will have access to this technology. I think the issue for me is trying to use this technology for people in residential aged care, especially when there is a level of dementia. It's hard for me to engage with people with dementia in person, and I find it much more difficult on Zoom. And I guess for them too, it's more difficult, much easier to be able to stand up there and have some interaction with people. So that's what we do, as I said, free of charge. 1-800-700-600 is our telephone number, which is a national telephone number. So through business hours, you will normally get a Victorian intake advocate. After hours, you will get an OPAN call taker. And sometimes when a Telstra or the telephone services are not behaving themselves, you could be in Western Australia and still get Victoria. I don't know how it happens, but we often get calls from out of state. We'll go, oh, I don't know how you did that, but here we go. So, but our service is for Victorians. So we refer to our other service delivery organisations across Australia if we get those out of state calls, unless, of course, we can give them some information, there and then, done, dusted. But if they need advocacy, we refer. So, so there's, I think there would be, if I count them up, there's probably, by Christmas, there's probably 12 advocates operating, 5, 7, probably there'll be 12 of us working, ready to work, I suppose. We're inducting our new staff, and we hopefully have a greater spread across Victoria to meet with older people as they need it. We do try and do community information sessions like this too, so that we can reach people in the community or prior to them entering the aged care system. And that's a navigator role, but often I will go out to something like a Rotary Club or a Probus Club, where you might have 60 people and only perhaps 20 of them are using home care packages, but they're all at that point where they might want them, they might seek them, or those community members might have someone in residential aged care. So we're very, very willing, I suppose, if you have any of those groups, family groups, whatever, to speak to people also about advocacy services, which would be through Joanna, really. She's our education coordinator. So anything that I might have missed there for you about what we do that you would like to ask?
Yeah, I just had a question. Thank you. Very informative, but and I could be mixing you up with someone else, but just wanting to establish that it's you assist people who are using government services. Is that right?
Yeah, Commonwealth funded aged care services. Yes. Yeah. So we're not paid advocates. I think there are organisations or workers, if you like, across Australia who charge for advocacy services, but we're funded by the Commonwealth to provide free services to Commonwealth, to users or seekers of users of Commonwealth funded aged care services. Yeah.
So it wouldn't the NDIS wouldn't come into this.
No, I'm sorry. No, that's right. Yeah. So our space, I'm actually going to move because I think I have to plug my phone in because that's going to go flat too. And we do get into I'm not going to say the NDIS space. We work with people who receive NDIS because they're residents of residential aged care. So there's a crossover there for aged care services and the NDIS supports that someone would receive. And we actually are seeing more of that in our referral system. And I suppose that's because, unfortunately, more and more people as they age with a disability need to seek aged care accommodation because there's not a lot else out there. So yeah, I think we actually have 3 currently on our intake waiting for support. Our role is primarily to ensure that someone's rights are met. We're not NDIS planners and we don't know the intricacies of the NDIS, but certainly we know the aged care system and what the aged care system can provide. So to work in conjunction with NDIS planning if needed to make sure that the best is delivered. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it might be that someone living in an aged care facility is having some issues, or the family think that there are.
Yep.
And so the family might contact you.
Yep.
And say,
and they absolutely can, and we'll work with them if that's what they want, and that person in the residential aged care facility, being mindful that NDIS is not our expertise, the aged care system is. But work with consent, working with the NDIS support coordinator or family, whichever. It's an interesting space for us, I think, because as I said, it's growing. There's always been younger people in aged care facilities because of disability, I suppose, or on early onset dementia, but because they are a resident of aged care facilities, they technically also are eligible for our service. So we're working in that space. And I think as an organisation, hoping to grow our understanding of what might be needed for people with early onset dementia, NDIS supports in aged care. So certainly a growing area of concern for us.
Although it's interesting, my understanding is just the little bit of work I've done with the NDIS is that they don't want people under the age of 65 moving to aged care facilities.
No, absolutely, as do we. From my personal perspective, me either. I think there's probably much better suited accommodation, or there could be. It's not always available. I guess people who move to residential aged care have either been unable to find an alternative or felt that that was perhaps the best option for them. In my experience, if someone has an NDIS package and they are seeking residential aged care, they need to enter residential aged care before they're 65.
Correct, and the package goes with them.
That's right. And it may alter in that the package then doesn't have to provide personal care or hotel type services, but certainly the NDIS package can stay and support them with the extra social support, extra equipment or therapy that they need. I had a very distressing case of a lady who had moved into residential aged care with her disability, of course, because it didn't go anywhere when she turned 65. She felt that was a good move for her. She knew that she was starting to struggle at home and perhaps felt that she would move in. She was assured by someone, I don't know, that her package would go with her. She waited until she was 65 and of course she lost it. And I tried to encourage her and would help her to make representation to have that changed, but at the time she didn't want to do that. But unfortunately for her, she had a specialised wheelchair, and that's going to be very difficult to replace in aged care because they're under no obligation to provide something that specific, I suppose.
You've got to pay for it yourself, haven't you?
That's right, yeah. It has to suit someone's needs, but I think this lady had the bells and whistles of the, electric wheelchair and did everything that she needed. And unfortunately, as her needs change, then she may find it difficult to replace that piece of equipment. So, no, we don't want anybody into residential aged care before they need to be. And I guess NDIS support coordinators don't too. But once again, suitable accommodation is often the issue for people.
Yeah, well, we're just finding that the government won't let them go in under the age of 65, whether they want to or not. They're not.
Is that recent?
Yeah.
I have.
Oh, well, that's as far as I know, that's been around for over 2 years.
Yeah, okay. So I haven't come across that. My understanding is as long as they can have the ACAS assessment.
Well, that,
I suppose
good luck getting one of those under the age of 65.
Yeah, I was going to say the advocacy then, I suppose, from the disability sector is the need for that assessment and the need for that accommodation. So there's some advocacy around that to my aged care and the ACAT to have that done.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, I haven't come across that they're refusing to do it. I guess there's exceptions to every rule, I suppose.
I hope so.
I hope so too, but I would rather see for people who are living with a disability that they have appropriate accommodation in the community if that's what they want.
Sure. I guess I'm just talking about people with dementia, younger onset dementia, but yeah.
Well, I would have, okay, I find that interesting because I would have thought younger onset dementia would have been a reason to get someone across the line for an ACAT.
Good luck.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's interesting. I hadn't heard that barrier was sort of bigger than what I thought it was. So I'll actually might ask my colleagues to see if they've heard that too. So I'm sorry to hear that. It's is it difficult though for someone with early onset dementia? I suppose if it's hard to remain at home, do we need to be looking at other accommodation as well?
Yeah, they do. They look at those SALs and SDA, that's supported accommodation models. So I've got a few that are having to go there now. They can't go into aged care. Yeah,
and if you're not, I suppose from my understanding, NDIS provides a lot more support than even the top level of aged care package would, which is why if people need to, we encourage them to use the residential aged care system before they're 65. But I'm quite horrified really when I see what a level of support someone can get under NDIS and then they lose it into the aged care system. It's not appropriate.
Yeah, or it changes, because
it changes,
Yeah, anyway.
It's very hard, very hard.
Sue, oh, sorry, you've just gone on mute, I think. Do you want to go first?
Oh, I am on mute. Sue, I wanted to ask you, you were talking about bathroom renovations not being on the home care package, allowable under home care package, which I wasn't aware of. What other things have become unavailable to people through home packages?
Yeah, so this is only from my experience and the experience of colleagues, and bathroom renovations are not actually listed as an excluded item. But the I'm going to say what direction, the thinking behind it, bathroom renovations currently seems to be that it's a capital improvement to a home and therefore a homeowner's expense. Many providers are still managing to do their decision-making matrix and justify those needs. And absolutely, we can all see those needs. Some providers might not be able to cover the whole cost, but they certainly work to cover, things like they might remove the lift shower and put in a non-slip floor, and they might put the rails around, but perhaps they don't go to the extent of removing walls if that's needed. Having said that, there are many providers who can still manage the evidence, the need, and feel comfortable with that decision. Some providers are uncomfortable with that decision. Other things that we're seeing that are not acceptable, or that provide not acceptable, they're acceptable to us, but providers are going, no, we can't fund that. For example, one of my colleagues had a lady who had severe, I'm going to say arthritis, but it may have been from fractures or whatever. She had to stand in the shower for an hour every morning just to be able to get out, stand up and go out to the kitchen, basically. I think her hands were quite arthritic from whatever she was living with. She requested a microwave to heat packs so that she could put those in her bed at night time, alleviate some pain and actually be able to get some rest. She clearly struggled with, kettles, even though she may have had a tip kettle or whatever, it was difficult for her. The home care provider declined to buy the microwave. It was a household expense, suggesting that she use a hot water bottle. We were all thinking, I think there's a bigger danger in a hot water bottle with someone who lives with arthritis in her hands or whatever the condition is. So that there's one. Anything that can be perceived to be a normal household expense seems to be getting declined on a bigger level than what it was maybe 12 months ago. There is a reluctance from our perspective for providers, not all, but some providers, to not back their own decision making, I suppose. So microwaves, white goods are another one, fridges. We had great success for a lady who lived with hypertension that couldn't be managed completely by medication. She had had a number of falls because of that hypertension, actually falling into her wardrobe and fracturing her spine. And the request was that her home care package provide an upside down fridge so that she could go to the fridge on a regular basis. She had her husband at home still caring for him as well, both in their 90s, wanted to be able to access the fridge without feeling like or the freezer, whichever it was, without feeling like she was going to topple every time. That home care provider did come to the party and provide that. But most providers would say, no, white goods, household expense. Televisions are a sticky one, where we see the need for people with dementia and perhaps also call communities where the person with dementia is seeking some comfort in their own language or own, familiar culture, often declined by providers, unable to provide internet or streaming services. But I also see that as a valid need for someone who needs to connect with their community, and they're unable to do that in person outside because the dementia is progressing. But this is what may engage them through the day. And also, on the other hand, not as a babysitter, but support the carer in some way, that person is engaged with something on their screen. Difficult to get. Often providers will pay for I'm going to say an iPad, but like a tablet that can connect people, but they're unable to pay for the internet connection. So it's like giving someone the wheelchair without the wheels, really. So anything that you might consider is a household expense that you and I might pay for, it seems to be harder and harder to get.
So just on it, it's related. So sorry to jump in, but
no, you're right.
I thought people were often saving a certain amount of funding out of their own package to buy like a bed or these sort of extra things. So it's their own money or the package money.
It's the package
how can
money.
a provider say you can have that, but you can't have that when it's your own money?
Yeah, well, this is the decision-making process that they're undergoing. Certainly things like hospital beds, you know, the up and down beds, whatever we call them. If that's a related need, they don't seem to be so hard to get. Certainly equipment that's directly related to a health or a care need. I think the issue is when it's not a direct, what can I say? Like it's not a walking frame. It's not a, I don't even know what else.
When it's a bit out of the ordinary.
When it's a bit out of the box, I suppose, but we can see that it relates to a person's care needs. So I had a client who lived with mental health issues, and his only reprieve from his mental health output, or is, what was happening for him, was he did a lot of artwork and he did a lot of gardening. And the provider, up until the last couple of, last 6 or 8 months or 12 months, was paying for his art supplies and also helping him fund his gardening supplies, because he spent a lot of time planting and reorganising his garden. Over the last 6 to 8 months, that changed, and they decided that they were unable to do that anymore. They would send him an art therapist once a week, which of course cost the package a lot more money than him collecting supplies for his own benefit. But we're unable to do that because it was considered a general income expense. So it's very difficult. There's many good providers out there who understand, who want to do what they need to do and find a way to do it. But there are also many who feel, I can't think of the word, constricted by the rules, and seem to be reluctant to, as I said, back their own decisions about their client. So becoming a more difficult space to work in from my perspective. But that's what we're for. We're there to advocate for that person's needs and their perceived interests. And if they tell us that that is what they are seeking, we will do the best we can to get what they are seeking, and if not, an alternative that they are satisfied with. Yeah.
So I had a couple of questions from what you're saying. Do you have a typical time frame that you would be involved with somebody for? Do you say to them, generally it's this long, or?
No, it's for as long as needed, but we are issues based. So you call with an issue, we try and resolve it. We get it to the point where the client is satisfied, or we can do no further. And if we can't progress it, the option is the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission. But having said that, there are many complex clients who come in and out of our service regularly. So no time frame in particular, but a part of our, I suppose, the KPIs for our funding is that it is a open close sort of statistic, I guess, but we don't open and close for statistics. We open and close in relation to having assisted the person, provided information, or done what we need to do. So yeah, no time frame really. Yeah.
And the other question, I was just wondering what sort of backgrounds your 12 advocates by Christmas. So what
12 of us should count up properly. So I'm a social worker. There's a couple of social workers in the team. There are some people who have done, they're not psychologists, but have done counselling psychology degrees. We now have a nurse. The recruitment that we've done, I think a couple of those girls have done counselling courses, but they've come from, say, RAS assessment, or I think one of them's come from older person's mental health. So there's a mixture really of our qualifications. Yeah.
And is there, sorry, one more side question.
Yeah, all right. That's okay.
Is there like do you come at it from a legal perspective, or not so much? Like you don't have a lawyer or a person in the team necessarily who's coming from that angle?
So no, we don't have a legal program, like legal assistance program. We're not funded for that at the present time. That's not to say that we wouldn't be in the future. So we work purely as advocates in the aged care system. If people need legal advice, then we certainly can help refer them. And in the case of elder abuse, then it's Seniors Rights Victoria who has the support of a legal team as needed, I suppose. Yeah, no, definitely. Sometimes I wish we had a lawyer. Would be very handy. But no, at this present time, we don't have a legal service.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
I'll stop grilling you now. Does anyone else have any questions?
That's okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I'd like to ask you to talk a bit more about the community visitors scheme, please.
Sure.
Sue.
No worries. Sophie, is it? Yep, because
Yes.
I've got the vote on. So the community visitors scheme is also funded through the Commonwealth government. There are a number of providers across Victoria, and I think in the last 12 months, the Commonwealth released a lot of funding that ended up with providers that, from my understanding, might only provide a sort of a telephone or an online service. So through COVID, we provided a telephone online service, but the community visitors scheme is, for the most part, an in-person social support. So if you refer to us for regional Victoria or the other organisation, I can't remember who it sits with now, but for Metro, there's an auspice. What happens is that volunteers are matched with the person needing the social support. So there's a bit of work that goes into that. We take our referrals from people, the clients are receiving a home care package or on the wait list for one, or they are in residential aged care. So we can take a self-referral from a client, we can take a referral from a provider, from a family member, and with consent, our coordinator, Megan, she also sits in regional Victoria, but we have another CVS worker in Melbourne. They'll work to match the volunteers that we have on our system to that person. It's purely social support. It's also free. And so that then they'll provide that social support either in someone's home or in the residential aged care setting. Sometimes it might be provided if person in community is quite mobile, you know, they might meet at a cafe or something like that. And the flexibility is around sort of the arrangement between the client and the volunteer once they're matched about how often that would happen and what sort of timing and all that sort of stuff. So, yep, as much as they can, they match people to people with interest or age, if that's what someone's looking for. Often we find, I'm not sure, obviously you have men with dementia, but the dementia progression can be not suitable for community visitor scheme,
Right.
because often the volunteers are also seeking some engagement out of that. It's not to say that people with dementia can't have a community visitor see them, but certainly that's a conversation that would have to happen with our coordinator about how suitable that was, unfortunately. But for many people living with early stages of dementia, I don't think there would be anything to prohibit that. It's just a matter of having the conversations and matching the volunteer with the person. And particularly for men, I think, especially in residential aged care, they often are quite surprised to find out that we might be able to match them with another gentleman who shares their interest in cars or, racing or something like that. It's anecdotal, I guess, but what I see in residential aged care is mainly female residents. So it's a volunteer position. As I said, the Commonwealth releases so much funding for so many matches, so to speak, across the year. I think we're working above our capacity at the minute, but first you have to get the volunteers and then you have to find the clients. In some ways it goes around the other way, and we have a lack of volunteers and too many clients. But certainly Megan, our coordinator, works as hard as she can. So it's a simple, there is I think a referral form on the Elder Rights Advocacy website. But other than that, a simple phone call to us on 1800 700 600 and we'll get people connected to Megan, the CVS coordinator.
Just on that, so does it matter
Thank
where
you.
people live? Because my understanding is that you had to go to the right service, like it used to be MS. Remember the MS in Blackburn?
Is it still MS? I'm not sure. So MS
Last
did
time
have,
I looked,
did have Metro. I just can't remember whether it is still MS. Yeah, so they have Metro, and Elder Rights Advocacy has Regional Victoria. Yeah, Regional Victoria, all of Regional Victoria.
Yeah. And I think the Red Cross might have been doing it, sort of ringing a ding.
Red Cross initially did it in Regional Victoria, and our coordinator came from them. Yeah, but I think Red Cross is mainly in Metro now. Having said that, there are other organisations that have picked up some funding for it, and certainly our coordinator works with those organisations if they're pretty well entrenched. So, for instance, in Shepparton in the Hume region, even though we both have the funding, the organisation, and I can't remember who it is, in Shepparton is quite entrenched and well on the path to their, scheme. And so we would refer to them to match because they're on the ground. But mainly
such a huge waiting list. Sadly.
For community visitors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's partly to recruiting volunteers. And also, as I said, the funding is only for a certain number of matches between people. So it's not like just I can just have 50 volunteers and 50 clients. There's certainly only funded for so many. That's what I said. I think our coordinator has gone beyond that, maybe, but we have to be mindful, I suppose, of what the funding does and can do. Yeah, I think there's a big need for lots of things in community, especially as we get older and living with dementia too. So, yeah, so that's where we sit with that. But certainly just a phone call to us. We'll connect you with Megan and you can have a conversation with her if you've got someone you think might be able to use that service.
Thank you.
No worries. Any other questions about the advocacy side of it, or? Because I am speaking to other people's programs here, even though I do know about them.
I didn't have anything else. Did anyone else want to ask? Yeah, Gillian.
Just got a quick one. One of my clients has a home care package and she won't eat anything. She's reached that stage in dementia. But
okay.
So that all she'll eat is sustagen.
Yep.
And she's on a home care package and they've said that they won't fund that, even though that's a meal, because that's all, that's the only thing she's eating is sustagen.
Yep, and we've had experience of that recently where a home care provider has declined to pay that because they've considered it food.
Right.
Is there evidence or recommendation from her doctors that this is what she requires to improve her health, sustain her health? That would be the first thing that would be needed to provide that evidence, and either come to us or take it straight to the Aged Care Quality and Safety Commission, but certainly have the evidence from a clinician, dietitian, doctor, whatever, about the need for that. But yes, unfortunately, we have also seen sustagen become part of the general income stream, so to speak, which is interesting. One of my colleagues just had, I hope it's probably not your client, but someone with dementia whose assessments of the progression of her dementia were very clear that her using the sustagen, the protein drink, and her getting appropriate nutrition had improved her scores, I suppose, on whatever they were assessing clearly, and the provider still declined. That has gone to the commission and that has been progressed review. So that's what we're living with as well. It's disturbing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Very disturbing. Anyway, that is what we're there for, though. When people come with those sorts of concerns, we will assist them to understand what their rights are, to try and get what it is that they are seeking, but also give them all the options to be able to do that as well. Yeah, so we do welcome the phone calls, even though sometimes it is hard work.
And Sue, I did think of one more question.
That's okay.
If we were talking to a family who didn't want to ring you themselves, could we ring as staff just for a bit of advice?
Absolutely. So we take calls from residential providers, home care package providers. Yep, anybody who's seeking, and then that just becomes an information sort of service for us. Yep, absolutely. We do a lot of brainstorming, I suppose, with people who are giving support to people with dementia and for other people living in community and residential care. Absolutely. Yeah. And we don't know all the answers, but sometimes when we get our heads together with, case managers or whatever, we can think of other solutions or try something different. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah, thanks.
Anything else?
No, it's been fascinating.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry if I'm jumping around because I've got the phone in my hand trying to keep it plugged in. So sorry about that.
You've done
it's
very
been
well.
lovely to meet you all. I'm really, as I said at the start, impressed by the work that you do. And I sent I can't remember what it was, of something that you were doing earlier in the year. I sent around to our Bendigo Dementia network. They were all very impressed. Might have been the dance therapy information.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Someone emailed me, said, when can you deliver that? I went, oh, unfortunately, it's not me. But I thought, I wish someone could in our area. It would be really good. Yeah.
Oh, well, you just need to talk to Heather Hill and see if you can deliver it.
Yep, pass the information on. I said, no, you have to go here. So it is great from our perspective to have that information too, because what I see when I work with home care providers is everybody, they're all under the pump. They're short-staffed like everybody else. They do the best they can. But sometimes when we're doing that day-to-day work, we don't always have time to sit down and think about what might be different or how we could do it differently. And so I love getting that information because then I can sound like I know what I'm talking about when a provider rings, oh, have you tried that? So, yeah, it's really good for me. And it's good for my knowledge too, because I'm not a dementia expert by any means. Oh, it's great to have it. So thanks for the work that you do.
Well, that's our pleasure. And thanks very much for coming along.
Oh, no worries. And I'll leave you now. Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
I guess, sorry, before I go, Sarah, I guess Joanna sent our information out. Do you need brochures or anything?
I've got your contact information.
Yep.
So that went around and
beautiful.
People will feel free to contact you for more.
Yeah, and if you need hard copy resources with the phone number on it for clients, we're happy to send them out to whoever can distribute them. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
I just have one other thing to fit into the last 1 minute. Kate Swaff has asked me to just let you know about DAI's latest webinar, which will be on November 25 for us, How to Build a Network That Supports Your Organisational Goals by Alex D. Trimble, the MS Industrial and Organisational Psychologist. And I'll just pop the link in the chat for anyone who wants to click on that and learn a bit more. Apart from that, I didn't have anything else.
No, I think that's us.
Thank you very much for coming, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
See you next
Thank
time.
you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.